The millionaire kidnapped his best friend's bride, but the nurse he took was the wrong woman. The night was thick with fog over the Colorado mountains, and the road that led to Lake Haven shimmered under the glare of a silver moon. Somewhere between the echo of tires and the hum of a storm, a man in a black coat pressed the accelerator harder. His name was Ethan Cole, a millionaire, a man who had lost too much and trusted no one. But tonight, he was not chasing profit, he was chasing redemption. His best friend, Blake Anderson, was about to marry a woman who did not want the wedding, and Ethan believed he was saving her. He had planned everything with precision: the route, the timing, the quiet cabin deep in the woods. But fate had other plans. Inside the church, chaos broke loose. The ceremony lights flickered as the storm outside grew violent. When Ethan broke through the side door, everything happened too fast: the scream, the white dress, the confusion of faces. He pulled the veil over her head, whispered, "Trust me, you are safe," and led her into the rain. The car door slammed, tires screeched, and the world blurred into the sound of thunder. It was not until they reached the cabin that Ethan realized something was terribly wrong. The woman sitting in the back seat, soaked and trembling, was not the bride. Her eyes were wide with fear, her hospital badge still clipped to her coat pocket. The name read, ***, Lila Grant, Mercy Hospital nurse, ***. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice shaking. Ethan froze, realizing the truth hit harder than any bullet. He had kidnapped the wrong woman. "You were not supposed to be here," he muttered. Lila's breath came out fast, the kind that carried both fear and fury. "Clearly. So, what now? You kill me?" Ethan shook his head, guilt cutting through the silence. "No, I was trying to save someone, but I made a mistake." As the storm howled outside, the cabin flickered with candlelight. Lila's hands were still trembling, but the nurse in her refused to collapse. She noticed the way Ethan's left hand pressed against his chest, the tremor in his breathing, the fading color on his lips. "You are having a panic attack," she said quietly, moving closer. "Breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth." Ethan tried to protest, but her calm steadiness pierced through his chaos. For a moment, the man who had controlled empires let someone else take control. He stared at her, truly looked at her, the damp strands of hair sticking to her face, the exhaustion in her eyes that somehow still held warmth. Lila's voice softened. "Who were you trying to save?" she asked. Ethan hesitated, the words heavy on his tongue. "My best friend's bride. I thought she was in danger." Lila exhaled slowly, glancing toward the boarded window. "Well, you definitely saved someone, just not the right one." The storm thundered again, shaking the walls as if the sky itself mocked his plan. Lila turned toward him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "You could let me go," she said. "You have a choice." Ethan's eyes flickered toward the door, but the snow outside was already waist-deep. "No one is going anywhere tonight," he said softly. "Not until it is safe." For a long moment, silence filled the cabin, only the sound of wind and two people who were never meant to meet. Somewhere between guilt and survival, something unspoken began to stir. Lila looked at him again, not as a threat, but as a man who was broken in ways she could not yet understand. "Maybe," she whispered, "you were not trying to save her. Maybe you were trying to save yourself." Ethan did not answer. He just stared into the fire, the flames dancing in his reflection like ghosts of his past. Before the screen fades, a quiet voice asks, "Would you call it fate or mistake?" Comment yes if you want to see what happens when a wrong rescue becomes the beginning of everything. Now, let us return to our main character. Before we continue, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us continue the story. The storm outside the cabin had not slowed. Hours had passed, yet the snow still came down in thick white sheets, swallowing the world beyond the window. Lila sat near the fireplace, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. The silence between her and Ethan was heavy, broken only by the crackle of wood and the occasional rumble of thunder. She had stopped trembling, but her mind was still racing. She was a nurse, trained to stay calm, but nothing in her life had prepared her for being accidentally kidnapped by a millionaire with haunted eyes. Ethan paced near the window, unable to sit still. His coat was hanging near the fire, steam rising from its soaked fabric. In the flickering light, he looked less like a criminal, and more like a man who had lost his way. "You must think I am insane," he said finally. Lila looked up, her tone steady but wary. "You are not giving me a lot of reasons to think otherwise." Ethan gave a small, humorless laugh. "Fair enough." He turned toward the flames, the light catching the scar that cut across his right wrist, an old mark that spoke of pain rather than violence. "I used to believe money could fix everything," he said quietly. "When my sister was sick, I threw fortune after fortune at hospitals, at specialists, at anyone who promised hope. But in the end, all it did was buy silence. She died waiting for a treatment that never came." Lila's expression softened. "I am sorry," she said. "I work in that system. I know how cruel it can be when life becomes a transaction." Ethan nodded slowly. "That is why I tried to save her. Blake's fiancée, I mean. I thought she was being forced into something she did not want. I wanted to stop another tragedy before it started." He paused, the regret in his voice raw. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Lila leaned back, studying him for a moment. "And what if you were wrong?" she asked softly. "What if the person who really needs saving is you?" The question lingered in the air. Ethan turned to face her, and for the first time that night, he had no answer. A gust of wind rattled the windows, breaking the tension. The sound of distant sirens drifted faintly through the storm. Lila's eyes widened. "If they are looking for me, they will come here," she said. Ethan moved quickly, checking the locks on the door. "No one can get through that snow tonight," he said firmly, "but when the storm clears, I will take you back. You have my word." She studied him, the way his shoulders tensed, the way his jaw clenched every time lightning flashed. Beneath all the layers of control, he looked exhausted, like a man who had not slept in years. "You need to rest," she said. He shook his head. "I cannot. Not after what I have done." Lila sighed and stood, grabbing the first aid kit from her bag. "Fine. Then at least sit down and let me check that cut on your hand. It looks infected." He hesitated, then obeyed. As she cleaned the wound, he flinched slightly at the sting of alcohol. "You are good at this," he murmured. "It is my job," she replied simply. "Saving people who sometimes do not want to be saved." Their eyes met for a brief moment, and the world outside seemed to disappear. For the first time since that disastrous night began, the air between them shifted not from fear, but from understanding. Ethan broke the silence first. "When this is over, you will never have to see me again," he said quietly. "You have my word." Lila smiled faintly, securing the bandage. "Do not make promises when you have no idea what tomorrow looks like." The storm began to ease, its rage softening into a steady whisper against the glass. Lila moved back toward the fire, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She could feel his eyes on her, the weight of everything unsaid pressing between them. Outside, the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, pale light against the snow. And somewhere inside that light, the first thread of something unexpected began to form. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, the fragile start of trust. As the fire crackled low, Ethan finally whispered, almost to himself, "Maybe I took the wrong woman, or maybe she was the one I was meant to find all along." Now, let us return to our main character. The snow had finally stopped. Morning light spilled through the cracked window of the cabin, painting soft gold over the worn wooden floor. Lila stirred awake on the couch, her neck stiff from sleeping upright. For a moment, she forgot where she was until she saw Ethan by the window, his silhouette framed against the pale glow of dawn. He had not slept. His posture was rigid, one hand wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee, the other tracing the edge of his sister's bracelet that he always carried in his pocket. It was quiet, almost peaceful. Yet there was something fragile about that stillness, like it could shatter with a single breath. When Lila rose, Ethan turned toward her with a faint nod. "You should eat something," he said, his voice rough from exhaustion. She looked at him, surprised. "You cooked?" He gave a tired half-smile. "Instant oatmeal. Do not expect miracles." She took the mug, steam curling around her fingers, and sat across from him. For the first time since the chaos began, they shared a meal in silence. The tension between them had softened, replaced by something quieter and understanding neither could explain. After breakfast, Lila began tending to the fire, noticing how the snow outside was starting to melt under the morning sun. "The storm is over," she said softly. "You can take me back now." Ethan's eyes lingered on the flames. I will, he said. But first, I need to tell you something. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive. This is why I went after Blake. This drive holds proof that his company has been selling counterfeit medication under my former brand name drugs that killed people, including my sister. His voice cracked at the last words. He covered it up, made it look like an accident. I was supposed to testify a year ago, but he destroyed the evidence before I could. Lila froze, the mug halfway to her lips. You are saying your best friend is responsible for that? Ethan nodded. He used to be my partner. When the scandal started, I took the blame. He offered to fix it, then disappeared, and suddenly his name was clean. The woman he was going to marry was the only one who might have known the truth. I thought if I could get her to safety, she would testify. But I took you instead. He let out a bitter laugh. Some savior, right? Lila stared at him, torn between disbelief and empathy. So you have been living with this guilt all this time, she said quietly. You could have gone to the police. Ethan shook his head. Without proof, it would be his word against mine. That is why I have been looking for this drive. It is the only thing that can clear my name and expose him. The fire popped softly as silence stretched between them. Lila studied his face. The sincerity in his eyes was undeniable. She could see how deeply this haunted him. Then let me help, she said. Ethan blinked, startled. You have already helped enough. You should not be part of this. But Lila shook her head firmly. If what you are saying is true, then people are still dying because of what he did. I have contacts at the hospital and the state medical board. I can get this evidence to the right people. Ethan hesitated, the weight of trust pressing down on him. Why would you do that? After everything I put you through. Lila met his gaze, calm but steady. Because doing nothing is worse. And because I believe you. Those words hit harder than any confession. For a man who had lived in silence for years, they were oxygen. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest, something that almost resembled hope. You really are impossible, he murmured. I have been told that before, she replied with a small smile. As the morning stretched on, they packed what little they had and prepared to leave the cabin. Ethan folded his sister's bracelet carefully into his pocket, while Lila tucked the flash drive inside her medical kit. The air outside was crisp, the snow glittering like 1,000 mirrors under the sun. When Ethan opened the cabin door, a gust of cold air rushed in, carrying with it the faint echo of sirens somewhere in the distance. Lila glanced toward the sound, her pulse quickening. They are coming, she whispered. Ethan nodded. Then let us make sure they hear the truth. He looked at her one last time before stepping into the snow, and in that silent exchange, something changed. They were no longer captor and hostage. They were allies bound by a single mission, and maybe by something neither of them dared to name. The camera of the world had shifted. It was no longer about the wrong woman taken in the storm, but about the right one standing beside him when the storm cleared. Now, let us return to our main character. The road leading out of the mountains was a long, twisting ribbon of melting snow and broken light. Ethan's old SUV rumbled down the slope, its tires crunching against the frozen gravel. Lila sat in the passenger seat, clutching her medical bag close, her fingers brushing against the flash drive inside. Neither of them spoke much. The silence between them was no longer hostile, but tense with unspoken plans and what-ifs. The storm had ended, but something darker still hung over them, the knowledge that Blake would not stay silent once he realized Ethan was alive, and that the evidence he had buried was in someone else's hands. The morning sun stretched low across the sky when they reached the edge of town. From a distance, Denver looked almost peaceful, its skyline glittering under the after-storm glow. But Ethan's shoulders were tight, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. He has people everywhere, he said quietly. If Blake knows I am back, he will come for this before it ever reaches the police. Lila glanced at him. Then we need to be smarter, she said. Not faster, smarter. They parked behind Mercy Hospital, slipping through the employee entrance Lila knew well. The hospital was still waking up, the hallways filled with the hum of machines and the smell of disinfectant. She led him through a maintenance corridor to her small locker room. Stay here, she said firmly. I will find Dr. Patel. She works with the Medical Ethics Board. If anyone can move this evidence safely, it is her. Ethan hesitated, his voice low. Be careful. If Blake finds out you are involved, he will not hesitate to silence you. Lila met his gaze. I have faced worse things than lies, Ethan. Just trust me. Minutes turned into nearly an hour. Ethan paced the small room, nerves twisting tighter with each passing second. He looked at the photo pinned above her locker, a smiling group of nurses, all in blue scrubs. Lila was in the middle, bright-eyed and full of life. He wondered how someone who had seen so much suffering could still smile like that. He envied it. He missed it. When the door finally opened, it was not Lila who stepped in, it was a tall man in a black coat. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Ethan Cole," the man said. "You should not have come back." Ethan's chest tightened. "Who are you?" "Someone who works for Blake Anderson." The words hit like ice. Ethan's hand moved instinctively toward the nearby chair, ready to defend himself. "Where is Lila?" The man smirked. "You really think she was not being watched the moment she walked through that door? She is fine. For now." Before Ethan could respond, the man lunged forward. The flash of metal caught the fluorescent light, a knife, small but sharp. Ethan reacted fast, knocking the man's arm aside. The blade clattered to the floor, sliding under a cabinet. The two men grappled, crashing into the lockers with a metallic clang. Ethan's shoulders slammed into the wall, pain shooting through him, but adrenaline kept him moving. He landed a punch squarely against the man's jaw, sending him stumbling back. Then the door burst open again. Lila stood there, breathless, with Dr. Patel behind her. "Ethan!" she gasped. Without hesitation, she grabbed a metal tray and swung it hard, striking the man's wrist. The weapon fell. He cursed and bolted toward the back exit. Security arrived seconds later. The attacker was gone, but the evidence was safe. Dr. Patel quickly secured the flash drive inside a sealed envelope and handed it to the hospital's compliance officer. "It will be transferred to the state medical board within the hour," she assured them. Ethan leaned against the wall, his breath uneven. "You should not have come back for me," he said quietly. Lila wiped a streak of blood from his cheek and shook her head. "You saved me from a storm, Ethan. It was my turn." They stepped outside as the afternoon light spread over the parking lot. The air was cold but clear, the storm now only a memory. Ethan watched the ambulance sirens fade into the distance, then turned to Lila. "You just put your career on the line," he said. "So did you," she replied softly. "Sometimes doing the right thing costs us everything, but losing yourself costs more." For a long moment they stood there in silence, side by side. Somewhere between the chaos and the calm, a fragile bond had formed, a trust built not on perfection, but on shared brokenness. Ethan looked at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever happens next, I am not running anymore." Lila smiled, a quiet strength in her eyes. "Good," she said, "because the truth is finally catching up to both of us." The camera of fate seemed to pull back from that small hospital parking lot, two figures standing in the light after the storm, unaware that this was only the beginning of the fight for justice. Now, let us return to our main character. By the next morning, Denver was drenched in winter sunlight, cold but bright enough to make the night before feel like a dream. Lila sat in the hospital cafeteria, a paper cup warming her hands, her mind replaying the chaos of the attack. Across from her sat Ethan, his jacket torn, a small bandage on his temple. Neither of them spoke for a long while. Outside the window, police cars lined the street, their lights off now, the crisis contained for the moment. Dr. Patel had managed to get the flash drive safely to the authorities, and the state medical board had launched an investigation into Blake Anderson's company. It should have been a victory, yet Ethan's jaw remained tight, his eyes shadowed with unease. "He will not go down quietly," he said. "Blake has power in every corner of this city. Lawyers, investors, even the media. If he feels threatened, he will turn the whole story against us." Lila set down her cup, meeting his gaze. "Then we tell the truth before he does. If he controls the headlines, we tell people what really happened, publicly." Ethan shook his head. "That is not how the world works. They will believe the man with the clean suit and the perfect smile before they believe the one who vanished for a year." She leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "You built something good once. You can do it again. People remember honesty, Ethan. You just forgot what it looked like." He stared at her for a long moment, something flickering behind his guarded expression, hope mixed with disbelief. "You really think I can undo this?" he asked. "I think you can start," she replied, "and you will not be doing it alone." Hours later, they were back at Ethan's old company headquarters, a glass building that gleamed like nothing bad had ever happened inside it. The lobby receptionist froze when she saw him. Whispers spread through the office like wildfire. The man everyone thought had disappeared was standing there, alive, with a nurse by his side. Lila's heartbeat quickened. but Ethan's steps were steady. Inside the boardroom, Blake Anderson was waiting. He looked the same perfect suit, calm smile, but his eyes hardened when he saw Ethan. "Well," he said smoothly, "the prodigal partner returns. I was beginning to think the mountains had swallowed you." Ethan did not flinch. "You knew they almost did," he said. "You made sure of it." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Blake chuckled, feigning confusion. "I am afraid you are mistaken. You vanished after signing the release forms. You left me to clean up your mess." Ethan placed a folder on the table. "You mean the mess where you replaced real medication with counterfeit doses to cover your losses? The one that killed innocent people, including my sister?" Blake's smile faltered. "Careful with your accusations," he warned. But Ethan was done being careful. "The flash drive is already with the medical board," he said evenly. "They know everything. This meeting is not about revenge. It is about truth." The room fell silent. Cameras flashed as one of the reporters, invited by Lila's contacts, stepped forward. Blake's eyes widened. He had not expected the press. "You will regret this," Blake hissed under his breath. Ethan looked him straight in the eye. "No," he said quietly. "I have lived with regret long enough." For the next half hour, Ethan laid out everything: the records, the timelines, the documents Blake had tried to destroy. His voice did not shake once. When he finished, he simply stepped back, letting the truth speak louder than his anger. Outside the building, reporters swarmed the steps, shouting questions. Ethan shielded Lila with his coat as they pushed through the crowd. The cold wind bit at their faces, but the air felt cleaner somehow, lighter. "You just blew up your entire empire," Lila said softly. He nodded. "It was never mine to keep if it cost lives." They reached the parking lot just as snow began to fall again, thin and quiet this time. Lila stopped and looked at him. "You did the right thing," she said. "That is what matters." Ethan smiled faintly. "You keep saying that like it is easy." "It is not," she said, "but it is worth it." For a moment, neither moved. The city hummed around them. Cars, sirens, life moving forward. Ethan finally whispered, "When this is over, when all of this settles, maybe I could start again something small, something honest." Lila's lips curved into a soft smile. "Start with coffee," she said. "The rest will follow." And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole laughed a real, unguarded laugh that melted through the cold. Snowflakes drifted between them, and the world felt new again, as if redemption itself had taken its first breath. Now, let us return to our main character. 2 weeks had passed since Ethan's public confrontation with Blake Anderson. The story had exploded across every major network. "Pharmaceutical fraud scandal exposed," the headlines read, followed by Ethan's image, standing under the cold Denver sky with his coat half-buttoned and his expression solemn. The board had suspended Blake indefinitely pending criminal investigation, and the authorities were collecting more evidence each day. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a strange quiet inside him, no longer the silence of guilt, but the stillness that comes after a storm. He had rented a small apartment downtown, nothing like the glass tower he once owned. It overlooked a park instead of the skyline. Lila visited often after her hospital shifts, usually carrying takeout and teasing him about his terrible cooking. That afternoon, she arrived to find him fixing an old coffee machine, sleeves rolled up, a faint smile on his face. "You are getting domestic," she said. "Careful. You might start liking this life." He looked up and grinned. "I already do." They sat by the window, steam rising between them from 2 mugs of coffee. "You could rebuild, you know," she said quietly. "Start a new foundation. Use your name to do something good." Ethan leaned back, thinking. "I want to," he admitted, "but not another company. Something smaller, more human. Maybe a program for patients who cannot afford treatment. Something in my sister's name." Lila's eyes softened. "That would be beautiful," she said, "and honest." The moment was warm, but it did not last long. Ethan's phone buzzed on the table, and when he glanced at the screen, the faint piece vanished. "Unknown number," he answered cautiously. A man's voice came through, sharp and cold. "Mr. Cole, you should have stayed gone. You think Blake will rot in jail alone? There are others who owe him favors." The line went dead before Ethan could reply. Lila saw his face pale. "What is it?" she asked. Ethan hesitated. "A warning," he said finally. "Blake's people. They are still out there." Lila frowned. "Then you have to tell the police." Ethan shook his head. "No. They will assume I am paranoid or trying to make headlines again. We need proof first." The next evening, he noticed something strange. A black sedan parked across from his building, lights off, engine idling. It was there again the following night. By the third night, Ethan decided to confront it, but when he stepped outside, the car was gone. He returned upstairs to find his apartment door slightly open. His pulse quickened. "Lila?" he called out. But the room was empty. The drawers had been searched, papers scattered. His laptop was gone. A folded note lay on the table. In neat handwriting it read, "You cannot erase the past. Walk away before she gets hurt." Ethan's chest tightened. He called Lila's phone, no answer. Panic flooded him. He ran to the hospital, breathless, searching through every corridor until he found her in the break room, safe, sipping coffee and startled by his arrival. "Ethan, what happened?" she asked. He exhaled in relief and handed her the note. Her eyes darkened as she read it. "They are watching you," she said. "Maybe both of us." For a moment they stood in the dim light of the empty ward, the hum of machines echoing faintly around them. Ethan rubbed his temples. "This will not end until Blake's entire network is exposed," he said. "He might be behind bars soon, but his reach is long." Lila stepped closer, resting a hand on his arm. "Then we do what we always do," she said softly. "We keep going. We fight for the truth. And we take care of each other." Ethan looked at her, his voice low. "You make it sound so simple." "It is not simple," she said. "It is brave." Outside the hospital window, snow began to fall again. Slow, quiet, endless. It covered the city in white, as if trying to erase the scars of what had happened. Ethan turned toward her, a fragile smile touching his lips. "If I had not made that mistake at the train station, none of this would have happened," he said. "You mean if you had not kidnapped the wrong woman?" she teased. He chuckled softly. "Maybe it was the only thing I ever did right." Lila laughed then, shaking her head. "Next time, try knocking first." They stood together watching the snow, two survivors in a world that was still dangerous, but for the first time neither felt alone. The wrong rescue had become the right purpose. And as the night settled in, Ethan finally whispered the words that had lived in his heart for too long. "Thank you for saving me, Lila." Now, let us return to our main character. The following week moved like a storm that never fully passed. Blake Anderson had been officially charged with corporate fraud, but whispers still traveled through the city, rumors of bribes, cover-ups, and missing files that could overturn the case. Ethan knew that until the full network behind Blake was exposed, they were all still in danger. He had seen the look in Blake's eyes at the board meeting. A man cornered does not surrender, he schemes. That morning, Ethan sat in the corner of a small diner, scanning the headlines on his phone. Across the table, Lila stirred her coffee, trying to appear calm, though her hand trembled slightly. "You did not sleep again," she said quietly. He sighed. "Every sound outside my door feels like a threat. They are not finished, Lila." She reached across the table and touched his hand. "Then we do not give them the ending they want." He looked at her, a question hiding behind his tired smile. "How can you be so calm after everything?" She shrugged. "Because I have seen worse in the hospital. Fear eats people alive. I refuse to feed it." Her words hit him harder than she realized. He admired that steadiness, that quiet kind of strength that he had spent his whole life pretending to have. Later that afternoon, Ethan received a call from the district attorney's office. They needed him to testify again, this time in front of a federal committee reviewing medical licensing. "Bring everything you have," the voice said. It might be the final nail in his case. He hung up and looked at Lila. "It is tomorrow morning," he said. "They think it is enough to end this for good." Lila nodded. "Then we make sure it is." That night, as he prepared his notes, a familiar unease crept in the feeling that someone was watching. He checked the locks twice, then finally fell asleep on the couch. Hours later, a noise woke him, a faint click from the hallway. He froze, heart pounding. Before he could move, the living room window shattered inward. A dark figure stepped through the glass, face covered, holding a metal rod. Ethan grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a lamp, and swung it, knocking the intruder back. The man stumbled but recovered fast, lunging again. The struggle was violent but brief. Ethan managed to shove him toward the open window just as sirens wailed in the distance. The intruder fled into the night. When the police arrived, they found the message scrawled in spray paint across the wall. "Silence or she dies." Lila's name was not there, but the meaning was clear. Ethan's hands trembled as he looked at it. "They know where she works," he said. "I have to get to her." He drove through the nearly empty streets, headlights cutting through the fog. At Mercy Hospital, he burst through the staff entrance, shouting her name. Lila appeared from the hallway, startled. "Ethan, what happened?" He showed her a photo on his phone, the spray-painted message. Her face went pale. "We need to call security." But before she could move, the power went out. The hallway plunged into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the walls in red. Somewhere down the corridor, a door slammed. Lila gripped his arm, whispering, "They are here." Ethan's instincts kicked in. "This way," he said, pulling her toward the stairwell. They descended 2 flights, the sound of footsteps echoing behind them. When they reached the basement, Ethan spotted a maintenance door and pushed it open, leading her into the parking lot. Cold air hit their faces as they stumbled outside. Police sirens approached again. Someone had called for help. Within minutes, officers surrounded the building, securing the exits. Lila clung to Ethan, trembling now. "This is not just about Blake anymore," she said. "They are trying to bury everything." Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Then we fight harder. They want to silence us, but the truth is louder." When dawn broke, the hospital was safe, but neither of them could shake the image of that message. They sat in his car, silent, watching the first light wash over the snow. "I do not care what happens to me," Ethan said. "But if they touch you—" Lila stopped him, her voice steady. "You will not lose me, Ethan. Not to them, not to fear." He looked at her, realizing she was not just the woman he had accidentally taken that night in the storm. She was his reason to keep fighting. And as the sun rose behind them, coloring the city gold, Ethan Cole knew one thing for certain: this war for justice had become something much more. It was now a fight for the only person who had ever believed he could be good again. Now, let us return to our main character. The hearing room was cold and lined with fluorescent lights that hummed faintly, the kind of sterile silence that could crush even the strongest resolve. Ethan sat at the long wooden table, a folder of evidence in front of him, his heart steady but heavy. Across the aisle, Blake Anderson entered in a dark suit, his expression calm, almost smug, as if this were just another meeting to negotiate. Cameras flashed from the press section. Every reporter in Denver was here. The moment had come. Lila stood near the back of the room, wearing her hospital badge and a quiet look of defiance. She had refused to leave, even after the threats. When Ethan's eyes met hers, it grounded him. She nodded once, a silent promise that he was not alone. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "Mr. Ethan Cole," she said, "you may begin your statement." Ethan rose slowly, his hands steady even as his pulse raced. He took a breath and began. 2 years ago, I founded Carter Therapeutics with a dream to make medicine affordable, to help people like my sister who never got the chance to live long enough to see a cure. But somewhere along the way, greed replaced purpose. And the man responsible for that is sitting right there. Blake smirked but said nothing. Ethan continued, his voice gaining strength. He used counterfeit drugs to fill our supply chain and covered the deaths of innocent patients by falsifying records. When I discovered it, he silenced me and made me disappear. I took the blame for his crimes because I thought the truth would destroy everything I built, but the truth was already destroyed. The audience murmured, cameras clicking faster now. Ethan reached into his folder and placed a printed transcript on the table. This is an internal email chain between Blake Anderson and the distribution head discussing the substitution of unapproved chemicals. This, along with the financial transfers found on the flash drive, proves what we all know. This was not an accident. It was murder for profit. Blake stood abruptly. "This is outrageous," he snapped. "You have no proof that I approved those deals." Ethan's voice stayed calm. "I do not need to. The board's approval records are time-stamped with your signature. You built this empire on deception. But today, it ends." The chairwoman called for order as the room erupted in whispers. Ethan stepped back, his part done. Lila's eyes glistened as she watched him. She had never seen him so unguarded, so fearless. The panel recessed for deliberation, and Ethan walked toward the hallway. The weight of years lifted with each step he took. Outside, the air was sharp and clear. Lila followed him out, touching his arm. "You did it," she said softly. "No," he replied, "we did." He looked at her, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "You stayed when I gave you every reason to walk away. You made me remember why truth matters." Before she could answer, the door behind them opened. The prosecutor stepped out, a small smile on her face. "The committee has reached a decision," she said. "They are forwarding charges to federal court. Blake Anderson is being taken into custody immediately. Ethan closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. For the first time in years, justice did not feel like a word, it felt real. Minutes later, they watched as police officers escorted Blake out of the building in handcuffs. The cameras exploded in flashes. The empire he had built on lies was collapsing in front of the world. Leela turned to Ethan, her voice gentle. "You could walk away now. Start over." Ethan nodded, eyes fixed on the chaos outside. "I plan to," he said, "but not alone." That evening, they returned to the park by his apartment. The snow had melted into patches of wet grass, and the air smelled faintly of rain. Ethan sat on the bench where he had once hidden from the world, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "I spent years chasing redemption," he said quietly. "I thought it was something I had to earn, but it was always something I had to live." Lila smiled, brushing her hair back as the wind picked up. "And now you are living it," she said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Her breath caught. "Ethan." He smiled faintly. "It is not what you think," he said, opening it to reveal a silver bracelet engraved with his sister's initials and a new name beside them. LG. "You saved my life, Lila. This was hers. I want it to be yours now." She touched the bracelet, her voice trembling. "I cannot take this." "You already did," he said softly. As she fastened it around her wrist, the city lights shimmered like a quiet promise. The man who had once lived in shadows had finally stepped into the light, and standing beside him was the woman who had made it possible. Now, let us return to our main character. 6 months later, spring returned to Denver. The snow had long melted, leaving behind streets lined with budding trees and a quiet sense of renewal. Ethan stood outside a small brick building in the heart of the city, the brand-new Carter Grant Community Clinic. The sign above the door gleamed under the morning sun, its letters simple but powerful, a symbol of everything that had changed. People gathered for the opening ceremony. Volunteers, doctors, nurses, and families who had once lost faith in the system. Among them, Lila moved through the crowd, clipboard in hand, directing staff and smiling as she greeted patients. She wore the silver bracelet Ethan had given her, the initials catching the light each time she waved or gestured. When she spotted him at the entrance, her smile softened. "You are late?" she teased. "Some founder you are." Ethan laughed quietly, slipping his hands into his coat pockets. "I was making sure everything was perfect," he said. "It had to be today as important." Lila tilted her head. "Because of the clinic?" "Because of you," he answered, and for a moment her teasing smile faltered into something gentler, deeper. The ceremony began with soft applause as Ethan stepped up to the microphone. His voice carried over the small courtyard, calm and clear. "A year ago, I was a man hiding from his own mistakes," he said. "Today, I stand here because someone reminded me that redemption is not found in money or power, it is found in purpose." He looked toward Lila as he continued. "This clinic will serve those who have no voice, who cannot afford care, who deserve compassion without judgment. It is named after 2 people who saved my life, my sister, and the woman who taught me what healing really means." The crowd erupted in applause. Lila's eyes glistened, though she quickly looked down, pretending to adjust her bracelet. After the ceremony, as the guests dispersed, Ethan and Lila lingered in the courtyard, the air warm and filled with laughter from the children running nearby. "You did good," she said quietly. "No," he replied, "we did good." She shook her head with a small smile. "You know, when you first stormed into that hospital months ago, I thought you were completely out of your mind." "I was," he said. "But maybe I had to be to find you." Lila laughed, the sound light and genuine. "You always know what to say." "Only when it is true," Ethan replied. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a permit application for expanding the clinic to another district. "What do you think?" he asked. "Shall we keep going?" Lila took the paper, scanning it with a grin. "You really do not rest, do you?" "Not when there is still work to do," he said. "Besides, I promised my sister I would make things right, and now I have someone to keep me honest." She looked at him, eyes warm. "Then let us make things right together." They stood there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The light reflected off the clinic windows, casting a glow that wrapped around them like a quiet blessing. For the first time in years, Ethan felt whole, not because he had built something new, but because he had finally learned to live without running from his past. He turned to Lila and said softly, "You once told me that saving people is your job, but you did more than that, Lila. You saved me." She smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. Then we saved each other. As the final guests left and the streetlights flickered on, they locked the clinic doors and walked down the quiet sidewalk side by side. Their hands brushed once, then again, until Ethan reached out and took hers fully. No promises were spoken. None were needed. The past had tested them, the truth had bound them, and the future now belonged to both. And as they disappeared into the glow of the city, the story that began with a storm and a mistake ended with something far greater: healing, honesty, and a love born from redemption. Now, let us return to our main character,